Well, hello, my radio friends. Now, I was asked to post a video on powering up a Crosley Model 52, and that's what one sees here. This is a pretty typical Crosley set for the period. This particular one employs 3 O&A tubes presently. Here's your 2 audio transformers. Here's your regen coil. And to the left of that is your beneath there, the black component is your book capacitor, and the 2 components here is your grid leak and grid condenser or grid capacitor. Once again, pretty Crosley-esque. It's not unlike most of their sets for their period. Now, as far as powering one of these up, I'm not sure what power supply you're going to be utilizing, but I will say this: I highly recommend the RB3, and allow me to turn my camera a little bit. There's the RB we're going to be utilizing. I highly recommend the RB3 power supply. Very well crafted, and it functions very well. Anyway, let's get on the set, shall we? One will notice that there's 6 connections to the right of the panel here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now each one of these is marked and labeled accordingly, and I wish to touch on each one of those as we go along. The very top connection is what they're labeling as B45. Now this is where one's going to take the 45 volts off of your power supply, off of your RB, and run a lead over to your 45 post. Now, I have to confess, I'm actually running 67 volts to this connection. It gives me a little more audio volume, and I find that the set performs just a smidget better. So we're going to take our 67 volt connection, which is this one here, and we're going to connect it to this spot there. Now, one will notice there's also 2 other wires connected to here. These 2 posts, this one and this one, actually kind of work as a pair. This is where one's going to connect their speaker between this connection and this connection. That's where your speaker is going to connect. The third one down is labeled B22. Once again, pretty self-explanatory. We're going to come off our power supply, off our RB, off the 22 volt tap and 22 volt connection over to this location. And we're merely going to plug that in here. Now this one down here is a little bit confusing for people. This one is labeled A plus and B minus. This, your B minus, which is your negative side of these 2 positive voltages, your 45 and your 22, this is the negative side, the return for it. That's going to be returned to your A+. The easiest way to do that is merely on your power supply, put a jumper from B- to A+ on your power supply. In fact, let me see if I can come this way, at least show it to you. One will see a white wire back here. That's going from my B- over to my A+ on my power supply. That'll bring my B- return back to where it needs to be. But we're still going to need to put a filament connection here. And this is going to be your A+. Now you're going to configure your power supply for 6 volts. 6 volts A voltage. And this is where you're going to connect your A+. So we'll do that now. This bottom one here, this is your A-. This is where one's going to connect their just that, your negative or A- of your coming off your A supply. So we'll connect that up here. And lastly, one will notice we have a C- connection. What we're going to do in this case, because we're running an O1A output tube, we are merely going, makes it real simple, we are going to merely put a jumper from here to here, from your C minus to your A minus. And if we were using a stronger output tube, such as a 112, for instance, one would actually have to apply a bias voltage to this location. But once again, because we're using O and A's, we're merely going to put a jumper from C minus to A minus. Just as simple as that. And with that said, we now have our set connected electrically. The only other connection we have to make would be for all the way to the left, our antenna, and the bottom, our ground. Now bear in mind, the antenna back in the day was a typically 100-foot length antenna. Now with today's stronger local stations, it's not so critical to run 100 foot, but 20 to 30 foot is not out of the norm. And of course, this could be dependent upon your location and stations therein. Lastly, the bottom left's your ground. Now, I can't emphasize this enough. On these early sets such as this, an earthen ground is paramount. In fact, I have a ground rod driven outside my shop with a lead coming off of it over to my bench. And I also have a ground rod driven outside my radio room in my house. And I have a ground wire coming into my house to utilize for this function. Very, very critical on these early sets. So anyway, with that said, let's put this down here. Let's apply some power and see what we get. This is a local station. Now, I have to say, Crosleys are notorious for not having the best audio quality, and this set is no exception. It does play, and it has listenable quality, but it's certainly not the best audio quality one's going to find. And as we come across the dial, there's a local religious station. It's a local talk radio, sports. But anyway, that pretty much covers the powering up and connections therein of powering a Crosley Model 52. And for what it's worth, the 51 and 50 will all power up pretty much identically. So if you can power up a 52, you could do a 50 and a 51 just the same. But anyway, I hope that answers some of your questions. And should you have any questions, by all means, feel free to ask, and I will certainly be glad to answer. Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all following, and of course, as always, until next time.